everybody to the Booktrib live chat today.
Welcome
We're
everybody
honored
to
to
the
have with
Booktrib
us
live
today the
chat
very
today.
talented
We're
Jason
honored
Mott,
to have with us
author
today
of
the
The
very
Returned.
talented Jason Mott,
Before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to the University of Carolina, Wilmington.
Returned.
Jason's chat is
Before we get
streaming
started,
live
I'd
from
like to
their
give a shout
bookstore
out to the
today,
University of
where he'll be
Carolina,
signing books
Wilmington.
for folks after his live chat with
Chat is
us.
streaming live from their bookstore today.
If you would like
Where he'll be
to
signing
try to
books
snag a
for
signed
folks after his
copy,
live
you
chat with us.
can go to the Jason
If you
Mott
would like
landing
to
page
try to
on
snag a signed
booktrib.com.
copy,
They have a
you
special
can go
telephone
to
number where you can
booktrib.com.
call and
They have a
request a
special
signed copy.
number where you can call and request a signed
But if you're sitting and watching on Spreecast at the end of the live
If
chat, you're
you're
going to have
sitting and
to
watching
hop
on
over to the
Spreecast
site
at the end of the
to
live chat, you're going to have
find
to
that phone
hop
number.
over to the site
There's
to
also a new
find that
company
phone
called
number. There's also a new
Lithographs
company
that makes these
called
very cool
Lithographs
t-shirts, which I'm going to
that
show you
makes these
mine.
very cool
I have
t-shirts, which I'm
Robinson
going to show you
Crusoe
mine.
here.
I have
The book is actually
Robinson
printed on the
Crusoe here.
t-shirt. They're
The book
offering
is actually
Booktrib
printed
members a
on the
10%
t-shirt.
discount
They're
today.
offering
Just
Booktrib
go once
members
again
a
to
10%
Jason's
discount
landing
today.
page and
Just
you'll
go once
find
again to
a
Jason's
widget where you can
landing
click and get
page
that
and you'll
discount.
find a widget where you can click and get that discount.
So let's see, Jason earned a BFA in
So,
fiction and an MFA in poetry,
Jason earned a
both
BFA in
from the
fiction
University
and
of
an
North
MFA
Carolina
in
at Wilmington.
poetry,
So he's
both
at
from the
home.
University of North
In
Carolina at
addition,
Wilmington. So he's at home.
to the return, he's also
In
author of
addition,
2
to
poetry
the
collections.
return, he's also author of 2 poetry
As
collections.
many of you know, Jason's debut novel, The
As
Return,
many
quickly
of you
became
know,
a New York
Jason's
Times
debut novel,
bestseller
The
and
Return,
also
quickly
became the
became a New York
inspiration
Times
for the new
bestseller and
ABC
also became
series
the
Resurrection.
inspiration for
It's
the
releasing in
ABC
paperback
series
this week and it'll
Resurrection.
be published in over
It's
13
releasing in paperback
languages.
this week. And it'll be
Jason's
published in
doing
over
some
13
touring
languages.
today
Jason's doing
or
some
this soon
touring
for his book,
today
and you can go to
and
his
or
website,
soon for his book. You can go to his
jasonmottauthor.com,
website,
and look at his event schedule and find out
jasonmottauthor.com,
other
and
places
look
that
at
you
his
can
event
see
schedule and find out
see
other
Jason
places you
speak
can
and get a book signed.
see Jason speak and get a book signed.
Before we get rolling with viewer
Before we
questions,
get
Jason,
rolling
I was
with
wondering if
viewer
you could just
questions,
tell
Jason,
a little bit about
I
your
was
book,
wondering if
even
you
though
could
many
just tell
viewers
a
probably
little
are
bit
already
about your
familiar
book,
with it.
even though many viewers probably are already familiar with it.
Sure thing. And thanks for having me, by the way, as well. The book is about a global event in which people's loved ones who have passed away have suddenly begun returning, just as they were in life. It centers around this couple, Harold and Lucille Hargrave, who they're in their 70s at the point of the story opening, and their 8-year-old son, who drowned almost 50 years ago, returns to them just as he was on the day of his death at age 8. So that's the phenomenon that's happening all across the globe, and people are responding to it in a lot of different ways. And the book tries to explore that.
Yes. The story really resonates
Yeah.
with
The
many
story really
people who have
resonates
lost
with
someone.
many people
You want to
who
think
have
about
lost someone.
if you had somebody that would
You want to
return,
think
what would
about
you say with
if
them
you had
to them
somebody
if they had the
return,
chance?
what would you say
At the
with
end of
them
your book
to
in
them
your
if they had
author
the
notes,
chance?
you reveal
At the
the
end of your
influence of
book
a
in your
dream about
author
your
notes, you
mother
reveal
who passed
the
away in
influence of a dream about
2001.
your mother
So I wonder if
who
you could
passed
share that
away in
experience with our
2001.
viewers.
Wonder if you could share that experience with our viewers.
Yeah, definitely. The backstory is that, as you mentioned, my mother passed away in 2001. So it was around the summer of 2010 that I had this dream that I came home from work and found my mother sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me. So I came in and I sat with her, and for what felt like hours, she and I just sat and talked. Nothing dramatic happened. We just discussed all the things that had happened in the years since she passed away. I talked about going to school, trying to be a writer, these new people that I had met. It was just really warm, kind of cathartic moment where, for the first time in almost a decade, I was back with my mom again, or at least it felt that way. And I woke up the next day, and of course, I was almost expecting to find her there, and of course, she wasn't. So I was talking to a friend about this a few weeks later because I just couldn't get it out of my head. And he said, wouldn't it be amazing if that really happened? And what if it wasn't just her? And that's really where the story started. Things kind of got rolling from that point.
That's great. Yeah, good story.
Yeah, good story.
Jess asks, what characteristics
Jess
do you think
asks,
drew people to your
what
characters?
characteristics do you think drew people to your characters?
I think is the phenomenon, the idea of um, having a second chance at someone that's no longer here. All the characters in the book, they grapple with that idea of someone that they cared about is honestly and truly come back to them, and it's a very complicated situation because they've moved on in the time since that person has passed away. And so I think that, or at least I hope that readers are kind of seeing that conflict in the characters, and maybe able projecting themselves into that situation and kind of thinking to themselves, how would they react if someone that they cared about, who they lost, suddenly shows up again. I think you start to discover that there are a lot of things that you thought you were okay with that all of a sudden you're not okay with because you just kind of buried certain emotional kind of ideas. At least with the characters, they had moved on, but not all of them had actually dealt with this person's loss. Some had and some had not, and the book tries to really explore that. So I think that's what readers are kind of connecting with.
Diana asks, you have two published books of poetry. What made you take the leap to write a novel?
What made you take the leap to write a novel?
Well, actually, the backstory, which is kind of funny, is fiction was actually where I first got started. I started writing short stories when I was around age 14 or 15, somewhere in that general neighborhood. Nothing serious, just kind of wrote one every few months, and it was something I enjoyed doing. Poetry came to me when I was probably around 22, 23, early 20s. That's when I started writing poetry. But then I fell in love with it. So I go back and forth between the two. I'll write fiction for a while, then write poetry for a while. I'll try other projects as well, but I go back and forth between those two. And so when I was working on my, going to school for it, I did an undergraduate degree in fiction, kind of got burned out on fiction for just a little bit and decided to try poetry for my graduate project and managed to get accepted and did poetry for a while. So I oscillate between the two. I'll go home today and maybe work on some fiction, and then tomorrow maybe try my hand at a poem or two and just see how that goes. So I go back and forth between the two, actually.
Oh, that's great. Sebastian asks, how much creative input have you had with the ABC
Sebastian
series?
asks, how much input have you had with the ABC series?
Not a lot, actually. Early on in the process, we did a lot of phone calls, and I went down to Atlanta and we sat down with the producers and had a big discussion about the story and how they could translate it to film and ideas that I had. And we had a pretty good creative session. And then once that was over, they went off and started working on the pilot, and I went off and started working on my next book. So we kind of had to part ways just because we both had things to do. And that's been like the major extent of it. I do a few emails with producers and with the actors from time to time, so I know what's going on. I'm very much in the loop as far as how the show is developing. But as far as me actually making decisions on the show and giving hard input and telling them where to go with it, none of that's going on there. Like, they're doing a terrific job. Aaron Zellman, who's the showrunner, him and I met and we hung out for a little while and talked, and he's got a very good idea of what he wants to do with the show, and I like his idea for it. So I'm just kind of letting him do his thing.
Yeah, that's great. That was going to be my question. How happy are you with what they're doing with the show?
That was going to be my question. How happy are you with what they're doing with the show?
Honestly, I'm very, very excited. I like the fact that they're staying true to the spirit of the novel. They may change a few cosmetics, but the spirit of it is still there. But at the same time, they're not trying to be a slave to the narrative. They're willing to let the narrative build out on its own, bring in new characters who are reacting in very different ways than the characters I may have created. And that's what they should be doing. I think Aaron Zellman has really took ownership of the project in a good way. So I'm very excited. I tune in every week just like everyone else does, and I love what's happening with the show.
That's great. So you don't get any insider information on what's happening before the show?
You don't get any insider information on what's happening before the show?
Well, I do. I know what happens in the first season. I know how the first season ends. I've actually, like, I've had opportunity to watch the whole show. Like, if I wanted to watch it, I could have watched it. But I actually told them no. I said I want to kind of encounter it with everyone else at the same time everyone else is, because I have so many friends that are supportive and they wanted to watch the show with me. So we do like viewing parties now, and I want that to be a genuine reaction to the viewing party. So I stayed away from actually watching the show until I could watch it with everyone else, and it's been excellent. But again, I do know how season 1 ends. I'm not going to have any spoilers, so I'm not going to tell anybody what happens.
That's great. What a good friend. Ted asks, do you have a favorite character?
Ted asks, do you have a favorite character?
Or perhaps characters?
I think I have.
Or perhaps characters.
Yeah, I think I have 2 favorite characters, honestly. Harold Hargrave, one of the main central characters, he's one of my favorite characters, just because he's that ornery old Southerner that I kind of want to grow up to be one day. I think if you can ever aspire to be anything, to be a crotchety old Southerner is just the best thing to be. It's just such a fun thing to be. So I had a lot of fun writing that character. I really enjoyed that character. So he's one of my favorite characters. Agent Bellamy is another of my favorite characters. There's a lot of my personal story about my mother and her death that I was able to actually sort out on the page through the use of his character. So his character is very close to me, very personal and near and dear. So those 2 characters are both probably my favorites. I love all the characters, but if I have to pick a couple, those are probably the 2 I would pick.
In the book, you have you introduce in between sections,
you introduce
a brief encounter with a returned character.
a brief encounter with a returned character.
How did you decide what or what was going through your mind about what characters to bring back?
About what characters to bring back?
It was always kind of tricky. I wanted to have as broad of a cross section as I could without it being completely random. You know, I wanted to have characters who, if they return, they would really have impacts on people, either on a very small personal scale or on a larger kind of global scale, as far as their presence being here in the book, being returned. So it took a while. Like, I wrote a lot of those vignettes. There are several that did not make it into the final product just because they weren't strong enough, or they were just redundancies of another character. Or maybe I wrote the first draft and then created something similar with another character that was stronger, so that second one made it into the actual novel. So it was a challenge working on that, but there were things I wanted to include. I wanted to really try to get a sample of how people would honestly and truly react to this phenomenon, and that created very different reactions. So I had to try to, you know, give credence to those as much as possible. So the vignettes were for an area to play in and give different perspectives on the return.
When you're writing, do you see the scene? Do you sit down and write the scene, or do you outline your work and work that way?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of outlines, just because I've worked on many manuscripts before, and what happens if I don't have an outline, I tend to lose steam. I kind of lose focus and don't really know where I'm going. Probably about halfway through, around 120, 130 pages, I kind of lose a sense of the direction I'm trying to go towards. So as a writer, I've learned to rely on outlines, because at least then I've got a framework for what I should be trying to shoot for and what points I need to hit. So it keeps me on task to have an outline. I know some writers are able to work without outlines. I just know that personally I've learned that I really like an outline to have that focus. But it's a very flexible one. The first draft is just following the outline. It's very rough. The final draft will oftentimes be very different. New scenes get put in, new characters show up, locations may change, lots of things happen from the outline to the final product. But I do like to have a place to start. I do like an outline.
Do you have do you write for hours? I mean, what's your writing discipline? Do you just write a few hours in the morning, or do you write until you're exhausted, the thoughts that are in your head at that time?
First thing in the morning. Right now, I wake up at about 6:30 or 7 and go straight to the computer. I'll write until about lunchtime, and then, 11 or so, take a break, get some lunch, and then come back and work until usually about 2 or 2:30. After that, my brain kind of checks out for the day, because the exhaustion does start to set in around that time. And it'll be, either if it's a first draft, I'm just banging away at the keyboard, getting all the words out as best I can. If it's a revision draft, that may be a little bit different flow, but I've learned that about 6 or 7 hours and my brain starts to get very exhausted. So, but I am very regimented. I write every single day starting at 7 a.m. and get it knocked out first thing in the morning.
Sounds good. Mike asked if you could unpublish your book and change one of the characters, would you do that? Do you have one that you would like to change?
There's a character I wouldn't necessarily change, but I would tweak his role within the novel. And this is kind of a pat on the back to Aaron Zellman and to the television show. In the novel, Fred Green is not the sheriff. In the television series, Fred is the local sheriff. And I thought that was honestly a stroke of brilliance. As soon as I read the script for the pilot and saw that they had made that change, I really wanted to stop printing the novel and let me go back and fix that to make it match that. Because for that character within the novel, if I had made him a sheriff, it would have given me a lot more material to play with, as far as him losing control of the town and things that happened in the second part of the novel that I could have played upon a bit more. So if I could change one thing, I would probably tweak that just a bit. But that's the extent of it. I would give him a new job. That's really the extent of it, and kind of tweak a few things. The actual character himself, I wouldn't change who he is or what he does. I would just kind of change his job a little bit.
Well, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Not to have a major change that you're interested in doing. Joe asked.
Yeah,
there are some shows that you're watching other than Resurrection that you're engaged in.
Definitely. I'm a longtime fan of Justified. I grew up watching westerns with my dad perpetually. Every Saturday, my dad and I watched the Clint Eastwood western on television. Great.
I've lost sound.
I'm a huge fan of House of
I've
Cards.
lost sound.
House of Cards did a
Mm,
terrific job, as a television series. Probably my favorite show that I used to watch was Deadwood. Of course, it's been canceled now, but that was a wonderful show on writing and acting, just terrific all around. So yeah, those are some of my favorite shows.
it's great. This is an interesting question.
Great.
Brooke wants to know that if you
This
weren't a writer, what do you think you'd be doing?
Um, if I weren't a writer and I could honestly and truly pick the job that I would have, it sounds strange, but I would probably be a race car driver. I'm a huge motorsports fan. A lot of people don't know that about
Wow.
me. I go to races,
Wow.
Formula One, rally racing. If it's got a steering wheel and a motor, I'll watch it be driven. Um, it's my passion. I love going to races and I'm a huge motorsports guy. Let me just say it like that. So if I wasn't writing and I can honestly pick what I wanted to do, I would probably try to pursue a career driving cars. Um, and there are a lot of Easter eggs for motorsports fans throughout the book, and it's funny because few people have caught them thus far. But I'll get an email every once in a while from someone who's a hardcore motorsports fan who happened to read the book, and they just list all the Easter eggs that are listed throughout the novel, and it's absolutely hilarious. It's just absolutely wonderful.
That's very interesting. I wouldn't have associated you with fast cars. um, Beth asked if you think a child returning in the story resonated with readers more than the others who have returned in the book.
I think so. The parent-child relationship is obviously a very formative relationship in everyone's life. You could argue that it's the most important relationship over the course of a person's life. And so, both from my perspective as a writer and trying to view the story as a reader might view it as well, that dynamic provided the most amount of things, material I could mine for the character development. Having a couple who had lost a child, there, that's a pain like few people can imagine to kind of go through that. So I felt that there was a lot of material there to work with throughout the narrative. And also, it was my writing, kind of an inverted story of the dream that I had with my mother. In the dream, I'm the adult, my mother returns to me, but within the novel, I just inverted that to where you got the parents and their son returns to them. So it was a little bit of me doing some therapy without doing too much personal therapy on the page, but also, tying that connection of family together.
Yeah. Well, I certainly saw you in Agent Bellamy as I was reading the book. Uh,
Wonderful. Yeah, lots of me and Agent
yeah, he's good. Beth asks, because you're also a published poet, she notes, and she wants to know what are some of your favorite poets?
Bellamy. There are a lot of those. Charles Bukowski, I always have. Everyone has acclaimed Charles Bukowski as one of their favorite poets because he's amazing. But more contemporary poets, there's Avan Jordan, Brian Dietrich, Janine Hall Gailey, Pablo Neruda is wonderful. Rumi. There's just a lot of poets. I could kind of go on far too long about poets that I like. But Bukowski, I think, is one of my favorites. I kind of always go back to him and find something there to really be fascinated by.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Uh, Spencer asked if screenwriting is something you plan to pursue.
Um, Screenwriting is definitely something I want to follow up on and maybe see if I can get my foot in the door somewhere doing. I'm a huge movie buff. I watch a whole lot of movies. That's probably what I do if I'm not writing, I'm trying to watch a movie somewhere. Um, and there's something about screenwriting that I find very fascinating. It's kind of this mixture of poetry and fiction in some strange way where there's such a focus on dialogue, but you have to be able to kind of convey a lot in just the scene description. So it's an interesting challenge that I would love to follow up on. And there are a lot of projects, television shows I would love to, if I could, find a working for, it'd be wonderful. Or just to write a movie, that I could be really proud of and have be produced would be something exceptional. So if I can get a job screenwriting, I would love to take a swing at it.
Sounds great. Well, Ted's asking a question, which I think is very interesting, given that you watch so many movies. Were you keeping in mind sort of an adaptation to television when you were writing a story? Were you seeing it from the perspective of the screen?
I completely was not actually doing the writing because this is probably my fifth or sixth manuscript that I've written, and all the other fiction manuscripts never actually went anywhere. So I honestly didn't expect the return to do too much differently either. So during the writing process, I was never thinking about, if it gets adapted, they could do this, and it just kind of, I think because I do watch so much film, that maybe there's something subconsciously in the writing that lends itself to be picked up and shot in a cinematic kind of format. And maybe that's what Plan B and the production company saw when they actually read the book. But there was no direct thinking along the lines of, if this were a movie, this should happen this way. I just try to write the story as best I can and see how it goes from there.
Great. So tell us, what are you working on now?
Sure. I'm in the latter stages of finishing up my next novel. The title is called The Wonder of All Things, and it's scheduled to be out later this year, around the end of September, October-ish. My editor and I are putting the last finishing touches on it tomorrow, probably. Actually, I need to email it back to her. But that's what I'm doing now. I'm finishing that up, and I've got a few other possible projects waiting in the wings, where once I get this off my plate, I'll go work on that. So I'm definitely staying busy. The next novel it's not a sequel to The Return, but it is another magical realism novel. It's got a very big magical realism element, and it happens in another small town. So people that read The Return, I think you'll find a lot of material there that kind of resonates with The Return.
Well, I really look forward to reading it. I thoroughly enjoyed The Returned, and I actually read it twice. It's good. Go back to see what I missed. Sunny Mae wants to know if you like reading your own poetry, or if you go to poetry readings or slams.
I do like reading my own poetry in front of crowds. Usually, I think for me, during the writing process, especially with poetry, readings are a very good way to kind of craft your poem, to figure out what's working and what's not working. If you take a poem or a piece of fiction, honestly, they both kind of resonate the same, and you do a reading, and you're able to see immediately what's responding to the audience and what's not working with it as far as the audience goes. So I love going to readings. I go to poetry slams every once in a while, not too often, but if I got something new that I want to work on and get some feedback on, then I will go and try to get tested
Oh,
out.
that's good. Great. So I wanted to remind everybody to go check Jason's website out to see where he's going to be soon. He's going to be traveling around a bit, signing books and meeting with fans of his book at different bookstores. He's got a few places up now, and he told me earlier that he's going to be adding more to that tour for you. We're going to be giving away a few books over on Booktrib, so you can go over to our site and enter for a few days for a chance to win the book. And if you're interested in a signed book, don't forget to go to Jason's page on booktrib.com and get the phone number for the bookstore right there in North Carolina while Jason's there, and they'll see if they can help you purchase a signed book. So Jason, I want to thank you so much today for answering our questions and being with us. It was great fun, and we wish you the best with your next book, as well as this continued selling of The Returned.
Terrific. Thank you very much. It's been a blast being here. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.